Well, everybody, and welcome back to the Trig Podcast with Joey and Goso TV on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Today is June 4th, 1:30 p.m. here Pacific. And today we're talking about a dear friend.
Mm. I'm good. I am good. So glad to be here with you.
Of course, thank you so much again for just being such a, as I said, an awesome friend. Are you hearing, by the way, an echo on my end, or are you okay?
I'm good. Can you
Okay,
hear me
good.
okay?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So, by the way, I want to just tell the audience that there is a link above on the screen here that you can see. If you want to call in, you can use that number up there. And at the end of this show, we're going to have a Q&A time so you can ask Julia any of your questions dealing with the topics that we're talking about today. So, Julia, what is it, before we get into kind of the meat of this, what is Vancouver like? What do you love most about Vancouver this
Oh
time of the year?
man. I have to be careful that I don't become too smug about it because I love Vancouver. It's right now. This is actually the one of my favorite times of year in the spring because everything is green and lush and everything smells good. The flowers are blooming and it's just like Vancouver is just this lovely oceanside walkable city. And I love being outside, like often just going for a walk and breathing fresh air. That's my therapy. And we live in a really like we are very yeah, just fortunate. We live in a really lovely area, and yeah, so
You love it.
I love it, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful this time of year. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. A little more rain than I
Okay.
think any Vancouver would say. I love Vancouver. I can handle a little less rain, but that is what keeps it green. So
Yes, yeah, the
you know,
green is so beautiful. Us here in LA, every time we leave to, yeah, Montana or Colorado, we lived there for a few years. We're always so shocked by the green, or
yeah,
Oregon. You're like, wow,
yeah,
green trees are beautiful. We don't
yeah.
see them here often. But in terms of, Julia, this topic, that is trending, you could say, on Twitter and Instagram and all the rest, with both the pandemic, but now kind of that's taken a bit of a backseat to race and protest, and then as people of healing, that we are, as you as a healer, you could say, as a woman that is a psychologist and someone who loves to help people understand their process. I'm always intrigued on why did someone like you get into psychology, and then maybe specifically, I want to ask you the first question in terms of the why. How does this issue of race connect with your personal story? Why is this so important to you?
Mm. So interesting. If you probably ask most therapists, the reason they say they want to become a therapist is to help other people.
Yeah.
But the truth is because they want to help themselves,
Hmm.
right? Like we start to resonate with these ideas and start to understand ourselves better. And then we want to go deeper with it. And I think, you know, yeah, most therapists, like we don't realize this. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize how many issues I had until I started digging. But I think it's this sort of subconscious motivator that we're like, of course we want to help other people, but also really wanting to understand ourselves better. And so, I think that can be a beautiful combination when we can heal and grow together. And I could talk more about that and sort of more around feminist psychology and how it's sort of very different than the typical patriarchal, traditional um, of psychology where it very much is about like expert and patient, right?
Mm.
Or understanding more that like all of us have our stuff, and you can be a leader while also walking alongside. And so I think that's a little bit more of the feminist psychology, where it's this real acknowledgement that of us have it all together, that we're all human, and no shame in that.
Wow.
And so,
And that, tell me more, because my guess is that really shapes a lot of what we're going through now. How, tell me more about mindset when it comes to
oh,
counseling.
well, and I think that we'll see that a lot, right? Like I'm not an expert.
Mm.
I'm a feminist expert. I'm not a racist, anti-racism expert. I am not. I am a baby. I am learning and I am growing. And, just really understanding that I think that like patriarchy and racism are run along the same spectrum, right?
Mm.
It's this whole idea of power over, greater and less than, more important, less important. Right. And I think perhaps we are a little further along with the feminist movement. We're not there yet, but now we're addressing this other big aspect of it. And it's the race, right? It's the race movement, where it's like, oh my gosh, like this is happening. This wasn't something that, was resolved in the 60s, right? With the human rights movement. It wasn't like, okay, one and done, now we're good. And I think we're really starting to understand that. I think a lot of people have sort of thought, and maybe our parents' generation who went through that thought, okay, now there's equal rights and we're good. And I think we're having this awakening right now, and we're realizing, no, we're not. Like, we're not. We just started, right? Like in the 60s, it started. And then it kind of went, I think my experience, and I can't speak for all white people, but I think that it sort of went dormant because we thought it was solved. We're like, great, it's done. I don't have to worry about this anymore. And then I think that now we're just really, and I know so many white people I've talked to who are like, I had no idea. I had an idea. Okay, that's not true. I had an idea that it was a problem, but I didn't realize it was this bad.
Yeah.
And I think this is good. I think it's good to wake up and open our eyes and to face ourselves, right? To face ourselves. I race privileged off the backs of other people in my backyard. Right? Like I have gained from other people's loss. And it's okay to say that without going into a bunch of shame and guilt and feeling like a terrible human being. This is the way that we were raised in our culture and our society. And we were trained to believe and think in certain ways from that, right? From the messages. We don't have to shame ourselves. That's not going to be helpful. Then we're going to feel terrible and run away and hide. That's what shame does. What we can do is face ourselves and look inward and reflect. And there's the opportunity for growth. Like shame doesn't actually spur people to action. Guilt doesn't really even spur people to action. Then it may make it about us. I feel so terrible. I feel so bad. I'm so upset. Okay, great. And I you can process your feelings and deal with your feelings and do that for yourself. But then do something. Right? If you care, and David and you and I were talking about this before, you get to decide what you do or don't do. You don't have to. And like I was saying before, doing something with the anti-racist movement or not doing something is not an evaluation of your worth as a human being. It doesn't make you a good person if you do something. It doesn't make you a bad person if you don't do something. Right? It's not an evaluation of you. We have inherent worth. We are inherently valuable because we were born. That's not equated to what we do or don't do or think or don't think. And so I think just really my sort of call to non-Black people, or whoever is included and identifies with wanting to participate in anti-racism, is to just really not make this about how you feel, right? But process your feelings and use those feelings as impetus for action.
Sure.
Right? Feelings in and of themselves don't really do anything. It's just a physical experience in our body. But when we can use those feelings to foster action, then we're talking, right? Then we're talking.
Now,
if you want to.
Oh, of course. It is that free will.
Yeah.
Where do you get the maybe I understand maybe the professional side of it. Where do you get, though, I'm trying to maybe even think of your childhood or your youth, where do you get this passion for these topics? Where does that come from? How was that shaped?
I was actually talking to my mom about this last night, and I don't know if empathy is something that you're born with or that you're taught, and maybe it's a little bit of both. But I remember I'm going to cry when I talk about this. I just remember walking down the street, when I was a little girl, and seeing homeless people on the street and being like, Mom, what can we do?
Oh, wow.
Like, look at those people. Like they're like struggling, and they're living on the street. They're sleeping on the street. Like, can we give them some money? Can we do something? Can we help them in some way? And and it's just sort of, I don't know. And I think just with this, everything that's just sort of come into the light, I can't look away. Like, I can't look away now that I've seen it. I can't look away. And I was telling you, David, okay, I'm going to cry. I'm just going to cry because it's bringing it.
Yeah.
But the reason why this hit me, and I think that this is really pretty essential, that for any kind of change, it has to be, we have to see ourselves in it. That's just the human ego. That's just the human spirit, right? Like, it has to be relevant to us in order for us to do something, right? In order for it to matter, it has to be relevant to us in some way. It has to be personal to us in some way.
Yeah. And
I was telling you that, I haven't watched the video of George Floyd because I can't. I can't. I found myself just crying every time I just see a photo of him and just like hearing about it. And I was like, for days, right? I was like, okay, something's going on here.
Yeah, right.
Right? Something's happening inside. I have to pay attention, because I just was like crying incessantly, almost just seeing any kind of picture, hearing any kind of story about this human being being treated in this way. And it was the moment that I heard when he was pinned down in the street and couldn't breathe and helpless. He started calling out for his mom.
Yeah.
And something in me broke.
Yeah.
And I have a son, and he's biracial. And he's a little shit. Like, he's the best kid in the world, but he is feisty, and he is mischievous, and he walks to the beat of his own drum, makes up his own rules. And for a second there, I'm like, I could see him getting into trouble. I could see him, like, he's not a bad kid. Like, he's not he's not a serial killer, but I see him just sort of, having his own ideas and making up his own rules, because he already does at 5. And there's just something in me that hit that I'm like, my son just gets into trouble, right? Like, he does one little thing, he gets into trouble, and he's being pinned down on the street, and he's calling out for me, and I'm not there.
Wow. Yeah. It's too much.
Too much. Like, that was someone's son.
Yeah.
Someone's baby that was being killed in broad day in front of a bunch of people begging for his life, and he couldn't do anything, and no one could do anything. It just hit something where I'm like, this is not okay. And I'm sorry, I'm not crying to make it about me. Like, I'm not like, oh, poor privileged girl living in her, apartment in Vancouver, removed from it all. But it was like, but this is it. I think that, it has to be personal.
Yeah.
It has to hit something in us, and then we do something, right?
Yeah.
Then we're like, okay, right? Because we can't take on all the causes in the world. There's so much going on in the world. There's so many tragedies and travesties and trauma and awfulness. Can't save the world, but we look for the ways that we can make an impact about the things that are important to us.
Yeah.
And that's where we do. And I think so often we have things that are important to us, but we kind of just get distracted, and we just like get caught up in things that aren't as important. I mean, they're important. I'm not saying they're not important, but we kind of get distracted by other things. And then we're like, oh, that's, someone else will do it.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, right? Like, I mean, we can't do everything. That's why I'm saying, though, things that are important to you, if you feel that burning in your belly, if you feel the Holy Spirit moving,
yeah.
right? It's time to pay attention.
Yeah.
It's time to pay attention. And it's okay to let that uncomfortable feeling be there, and to pay attention to it, and to be able to say, okay, I feel it. I feel it. I'm having the feelings. I'm having the reaction. I'm having the emotions. I'm going to use that. I'm going to pay attention to that, and I'm going to use it.
Yeah. What really struck me in that, I've seen the video, is that the ME report is that he died because of asphyxiation. You know, it was in that moment that he literally died while under the knee of this gentleman. And when they picked him up, you know, to put him into the ambulance, you could tell he was already gone. So all those details are very important to me, because they make this so clear that this happened right there and then, and that we can't escape this, we can't deny it, or we can't justify it in any way.
Yeah, and that was it. Like, I mean, that sort of spurred on this, like, I want to learn, I want to understand, I want to speak up, I want to amplify voices, right? I want to bring this awareness to the people in my community who may not be aware of this, right? I want to amplify the voices to my community. And that's right now, that's what I can do. This is the start, right? This is the start, where we start to understand, where we start to have that insight. Insight and understanding in and of itself doesn't foster change within us, outside of us, right? Like, but it's the birthplace of it. And that's where it starts. When I know better, then I can do better. And then I can take action. But insight without action is relatively futile.
Yeah.
Right? And people say that all the time. I've been in therapy for years, but, you know, understanding hasn't changed anything. Knowing where my problems come from and knowing what my problems are hasn't been enough to create that transformation. And that's exactly, and I think that's where therapy often, not always, I'm not saying all therapists do this, but where traditionally therapy has fallen short. Traditional, you know, where when psychology was created, it was really about just developing insight and understanding. But then now we're sort of, we are realizing that is the foundation of constructive action, right? You know something, and then you do something, and you make those changes, and you get uncomfortable, and you have to do something, right? And doing things is uncomfortable. It's great. Knowing things is one part of it. Great. And even knowing things can be uncomfortable, but it's like the next step is doing something, and that's even more uncomfortable. But it's in that doing, in that stretching, in that discomfort, in that growing, that the transformation happens. And growing is uncomfortable. If you want to grow, you have got to be stretched, and it is not comfortable. I've been so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's only been a few days, right? Like, I'm like, oh my gracious, wow. It's only been a few days, and I'm uncomfortable. And I've been called out, and I've been called to task, right? And I've been forced to look at my own privilege, my own racism, my own ignorance, my own blindness. And I mean, and it's uncomfortable, and it's hard. And we can, and you know, you can turn away and say, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's too hard. Or you could say, it's hard, and this is the birthplace of my growth, of my healing, of my reconciliation. This is it. And I don't have to if I don't want to. But if I want what's on the other side of it, the only way to get through is to go through.
Yeah. Do you consider this moment in your life here, June 2020, like the beginning of something new in your life?
Yeah.
And what is that? What is that? What is being birthed in you?
It's that awareness. And like, I watched this video by one of my mentors, Nicole Walters, who is this brilliant businesswoman who I've followed for years. And she did a really, she's a Black woman, and she did a really poignant video that just hit me, especially as a parent. And she said on there, like, parents, you know, just teach your children, don't teach your children not to see race. Teach your children to see race. Teach your children to look out for racial injustice, for people. Don't put your blinders on and pretend it's not happening, right? Good intention to say you don't see race, but it's going to make you not see what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And so teach your children to see race, and teach your children to look out for their colored friends. right? Teach your children to look out, not just for your colored friends, because as we know that like it's depending on where you live, different races are treated differently.
Mm.
Look out for your colored friends that are being treated unfairly.
Right.
Right. Look out for your Black friends.
Mm.
Stand up for your Black friends. She said, you know, you don't have to do it for them, but just think of it. And she used a really interesting metaphor. Just think of it as like your friend in a wheelchair, where like they can get around and they can like push themselves around, they can wheel themselves around. Every once in a while, when there's a hill, just like offer to push them.
Wow.
Offer to push them, because you know they got to save their energy, because they got to keep wheeling around all day. But just every once in a while, just like push them, help them up the hill, give them a break so that they can save their energy, because they're going to have to keep struggling.
Wow.
And that's what you can do. Teach your children to step in, to say something, to do something, to fight for them, because they are fighting a lot and they're tired.
Wow.
And I was like, I've never had a
Powerful.
race conversation with my biracial children. Right?
So that's coming, you think?
We've started.
Yeah.
And I just started to them. I've started talking to them and just started saying like, hey, look out for this, you know?
Walk us through that. We have a lot of young moms that are probably in the same boat.
Yeah, I just started saying like, I want you to know that there's people who treat people differently because of the color of their skin. I'm not saying you do, but I'm saying that there are people that do. There are people that think that someone is less than or not as important and not as valuable simply because of the color of their skin. And my kids are so confused. They don't get it. They're like, what do you mean? But we're all just people. I don't get it. And I just said, you know, there are people that think that, and I just want you to know. And there are going to be people, maybe even kids, who think that and say things. And I want you to know that that's not okay. I want you to take note. If anyone ever says something bad about someone, because, you know, we're talking about race right now, but we could talk about sexism and ageism and, you know, or sorry, not ageism, sizeism. We could talk about all that stuff, you know, kids make fun, but right now we're talking about race. Right now we're talking about race. And so another child making fun of another child because of the color of their skin or the shape of their eyes or the size of their nose, right? You say something. Or you tell a grown-up, or you tell me. It's not okay. You tell on them, and you tell them it's not okay. And they're just, so we're just starting, right? My son is 5, my daughter is 7, and we're just starting to sensitize them a little bit. And I'm only doing this, and so I just want to be really clear. Anything I'm doing right now, anything I'm saying right now, it's only because of what I've been learning from Black people. This isn't me like having all of these brilliant insights as this, you know, woman who has all the answers and knows this. Like, this is me listening. This has been me listening for like just hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and consuming and be like, just like, what can I do and how can I start and what, you know, what's the first step and like help me, like, and you know, not asking them, but like asking myself, like, I want help and I'm going to seek it out. I'm going to look for it. I'm going to take it in. I'm going to learn, right? I'm going to learn. I'm not going to ask people to do it for me, but I'm going to learn and I'm going to listen to what they're saying.
I want to read a comment really quick here.
Yes.
That's just wonderful. Sabina said, you're right. It's very uncomfortable to see our own racism, our own blindness, but we have to. Totally agree with that.
And that's it, right? Like saying, oh, I'm not racist. We're all racist. We're all racist.
I want to speak to that really quick in terms of what I love about your videos on YouTube. And to my audience, if you haven't watched Julia's YouTube videos, we'll put a link at the bottom of this episode, but you have to. What I love most about your videos, Julia, is how sensitive you are to the process, that people, you don't assume that everyone knows what to do. You start at the beginning and you walk them through this process. And here's what I want to say in terms of colors, right? I'm Latino. I grew up in Central America, moved to Long Beach when I was 6 years old here in the LA area. And we face racism within our own culture in terms of color. So the darker you are, the less skilled or you're looked down upon. And so my father is maybe even twice as dark as I am. So we've always seen that. And plus, we're from the Atlantic coast, which is more most of the slaves came from in terms of back in those days. So we probably have African roots in us as well, or baby Indian, as we call it, in terms of back then, Pakistan, perhaps. But here's what I mean. Even those of us who are of color, we still have to teach our kids the process of learning to love, learning to see color and what to do with that. So that's why I love what you're doing, because it's not just for one person, it's for every mom out there that is wondering, how do I bring this up?
Yeah.
So what do you think kids respond to in terms of these topics that seem to be so heavy? What has helped you teach them some of these things?
Teaching empathy.
Okay.
Right. And it's just, I've been talking about this too, like how I've been teaching my children around with the coronavirus.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And being very aware of that, instead of saying, stay away from other people, right? Keep your distance from other people. Other people have germs. Right? Like, I don't want to make them scared.
Yeah.
I don't want to make them think that other people are bad. So we've just really I've been really mindful of the language and saying, okay, guys, let's respect other people's space. Right? Make sure you move to the side of the sidewalk. Let's give people space. Let's keep our germs to ourselves. And the kids are like, oh, okay, great. Like, they're not scared. My kids are not scared.
Yeah.
They're not anxious. I'm like, we just need to keep our germs to ourselves so that we keep everyone safe, so that we keep everyone healthy. And we got to give other people space and be respectful of that and watch out for other people and make sure that we're giving them space, because we don't want to get too close and give them our germs, because that's not fair. And they're like, okay, right? So my kids are like, and they're just sort of aware. And, we're walking down the sidewalk and I call out if they're like walking ahead of me, like, space, guys, give people space, 2 meters apart, or in the US, 6 feet apart.
Right. Yeah. 6 feet. Yeah.
give 6 feet, guys. Don't forget 6 feet. Let's respect people and give them space.
I saw a young mom the other day telling her young daughter, move away, you're gonna die. And I thought, I don't think that's very helpful to this young 6-year-old. But I thought, unless you think about this, that's what we can be filled with panic and fill our kids with panic, unless you know what to say.
Right. And instead of telling your kids there's terrible people out there who treat other people unequally, right? Those are the enemy. It's saying, hey, look out for your friends who are being treated badly because of the color of their skin. Just look out for them.
Yeah.
Right. Look out for them, stand up for them. This isn't about these evil other kids, but it's about looking out for your friend. Right. Look out for people. Don't fear people. Look out for people. And I think,
wow, you're saying such amazing things. Don't fear people. Look out for people. Push the person in the wheelchair across the street. I mean, it sounds so revolutionary.
But it's not my words, right? And I don't want to mince this, because that was the metaphor of looking out for your Black friends, looking out for kids who are being treated differently because of the color of their skin. Look out for them. That was Nicole Walters, and she's amazing. She's not an activist. She's a mom and an entrepreneur, but she gets it though. She's been speaking out, right? Okay. She's been speaking out a little bit in a really beautiful way, in a really, just like, she's like, I don't know the answers. This is my experience, right? And just even her talking about as an educated, affluent Black woman, and what the racism she experiences. And this has been really opening my eyes. I'm like, oh, wow, like, this isn't some people, right?
It's not economics. It's not about economics. Yeah.
Nope. It's all people. It's all people. And Black people are not experiencing it from everyone, but they are experiencing it every day, right? And I can't even imagine what that would be like. Weed through derogatory comments every day, because of the color of my skin. Like, I take it when people and you are like, I think you're an idiot. I disagree with your liberal views, and like, your voice sounds weird, and you breathe too loud, and you blink too much. I'm like, okay, like, right, like, that's not personal for me. That's not personal. And I'm like, that's just, you're right, YouTube. Like, that's different, right? But when you're saying, like, you are a worthless human being, right? When you're saying, like, it's not even in so many words, but you were implying, right? If someone was like making slurs about my gender or my race daily basis, it would be really hard to not let that get in there. It would be really hard to not let that bother you. So it's really just, I think, just instead of defending ourselves, defending our whiteness and saying, I'm not racist, I'm not contributing to the problem, I'm not a bad person. I think too, a lot of times white people get very defensive. Well, not all people get defensive, and they're like, if you tell me I'm racist, it means I'm a bad person. And so I can't acknowledge that. So I'm just going to reject it and not deal with it, not look at it and walk away from it. Right. Because we go into shame instead of just being like, this isn't about shaming. This is about realizing and understanding and reflecting. Right? There's no shame. There's no shame in being a human being that was the product of your socialization. But when we know better, we can do better. And so that's been my learning.
Yeah.
That's
Amazing.
been my learning.
It's a great, I think, just so wonderful gift, I think, to everyone who's listening to you, because it's in the moment. You're being sensitive. Obviously, okay, it's not my original ideas, but yet you're making it your own. You are bringing it into your body like a virus and spreading that love. I mean, to be sick, you don't have to have been sick for 20 years. You suddenly got sick in that moment. That element, that agent came into your life, and now you're spreading it. And when love comes in, or when awareness comes in like a virus, you can't even help it. But something in you connected with that virus. You were open to it. And then now you're spreading that. And this is a message of love and hope and awareness and action, which I think is how life and societies are changed. It's it's almost invisible. You can't help but spread it. And those that are ready, Jesus would say, those that have ears, let them hear what the Spirit has to say. It's the same thing that you're doing. You're saying,
Yeah.
I am just hearing, and those that have ears to hear, let you hear what the Spirit has to say. I'm not saying this. This is not me being at the top of the hill teaching or being the guru. I've just heard, and now I'm telling you so that if you are open to it, you can also hear.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your voice, your platform, that you were ready for this? What made you ready to receive this? I mean, you have a platform, you speak for a living, you help people, and here you are. Do you feel, I know the word privilege is almost like a bad word, but I want to use it positively. Do you feel privileged that you have a platform to speak on
I
these
almost
topics?
felt like this responsibility.
Okay.
Right? Like, this is my responsibility. This is my responsibility. And I don't have to take that responsibility. Again, free will, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a bad person if I don't take the responsibility, but my thought, my belief, my stirring was that it's my responsibility.
You're stirring, great word.
And it's not hard. Like, David, here's the thing. It's not hard to speak up when you're listening.
Mm.
Right? I've seen a lot of leaders speaking up, trying to become the expert. And then I've seen Black people in their communities saying, that's not what we want. And them saying, well, I'm just leading out of love. Don't lead out of love, lead out of listening.
Wow.
Right? Like, love is great, but listen, because you don't know. And I think that's ego, right? Ego says, well, I have to know the answers to be a leader, and I can't be criticized, right? Even all of us are like, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be criticized. Well, be criticized. It's okay. It's just words and someone giving you feedback. Doesn't mean you're a terrible person, right? Ego says, if I'm criticized, I've done something wrong, and now I'm a terrible human being, right? Conscious higher self says, right? I made a mistake and I'm listening.
Explain to us ego. What is?
It's funny. I just did a YouTube video about this.
Okay.
The one I released
Check
this
it
week.
out. Okay.
Yeah, and
We'll
ego
have
is
to
just
put
our
that.
sense of self. It's the story about who we are, we deserve, and where life is, and it's just sort of how everything relates to us. It's the I, right? Right? It's how this impacts me. And, our ego says, if you don't like what I said, that's about me, right? As a person versus that's your feedback on what I did. That's your feedback on what I said. Those are your thoughts about how I expressed my thoughts. And that goes really deep. Like this is way deeper teaching that I teach in my membership community, and just really getting aware of our thoughts and emotions and how we interpret things and how we react and respond to things. But just really, it's okay to listen, and it's easy. It is so easy. Like anti-racism work is easy if you're just listening, right? There's so many people out there. There's like the Black community is like, this is our platform and
To
people are
talk,
listening,
right?
right? Like that. Don't say, what do I do? Just dig for a minute. Just look for a minute. And there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, not millions of Black voices saying this. And the other thing is that another kind of racist bias is thinking that all Black people think the same way, right? Like
Right,
all white people, all Hispanic people think the same way. Of course
right,
not. We're all
right.
just individual people with a brain
Mm.
that has different thoughts based on different experiences and different understandings. And so I just think be willing to listen, and then be willing to amplify those voices. And the voices that make sense for you, right? And I see this too, like people are acting and like, listening and then doing something. And then other people are saying, well, I don't think you should do this. I heard this person say you should do this. Right. And I think we can get so caught up in like who's right and who's wrong and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And I think a lot of it is just do something. If you want to, again, free will, that beautiful thing. And not, I talk about this in one of my videos. It's fear versus preference, right? If it's not your preference, if it's not your thing, it's not your cause, you don't have to. But if you want to, and you're letting fear stop you, then do something and deal with the fear, right? And my video next week is going to be about ego fear versus actual fear. And ego fear is, what are they going to say? What are they going to think? It's not real danger. You're not in real danger for your life if someone is like, I think what you said is stupid and ignorant, right? Right? Like you're not going to die. It might be uncomfortable. Right. You might not like the way it feels, but it's not a real threat. But our brain lights up and is like, oh my gosh, this is the end.
Yeah.
Right? And so we avoid this. We so get caught up in ego fear. What are people going to think? What are people going to say? What is this going to mean about me? So I'm not going to do anything, instead of being like, just let yourself be wrong. Let yourself receive feedback. Hopefully the feedback's going to be relatively respectful and not the person saying like, I hate you and you're stupid and you should die or whatever, right? Like that's a little
Right.
scary.
Yeah.
I don't think that's usually the feedback.
Right.
Right. I don't think that's usually the feedback, but like it's that ego of like, if someone corrects me or criticizes me or disagrees with me, then it somehow means that I'm a terrible human being. Even though I did a post on social media and someone said, you're a terrible therapist.
Yeah.
It's still not personal, right? It's just their thoughts about what I posted and their opinion about what I posted, right? They had a thought that that person shouldn't say that. And if they said that, it means they're a terrible person. And it's so interesting because I know, and I give this, this is maybe a bit of a deeper example or a more complex thing, but I put this post up on my Instagram feed. A bunch of people liked it. A bunch of people hated it, right? It's just words on a screen. And so it wasn't the actual words that I said that created people's emotional reactions. It was their thoughts about the words said that created their emotional reaction. It's not the thing, it's our thoughts about the thing. And people had different thoughts, which created a different emotional experience for them. And that's the truth for all of us. When we say something, when we do something, and someone says they hate it, says they like it, it's not the thing that created the emotional response. And this is way deep into psychology. But it's their thoughts about what we said. And we get so worried about what other people are going to think. It's like we're acting to control other people's minds. Does that make sense? So it's like,
of course,
I want to control what other people are thinking.
Because
So
of
I
how
don't
it
want
makes
to,
me feel.
right,
Mm.
right, 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 right. I don't want to say anything because I don't want people to think certain things. So I'm going to try and control their thoughts by not saying something. Or I'm going to say it, but I'm going to want to make sure I say the perfect thing so that they can have thoughts that I want them to have so that I can feel a certain way. Right? It's like we base so much of our feelings on trying to control other people's thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's just exhausting because we can't. We can try, we can act, we can learn, we can reflect, and we can try again, and we can act again, and we can fail, and we can learn, and we can reflect, and we can succeed, and we can fail, and we can try, and we can learn. Like, right? Like, it's just all part of it.
Now, when I talk about PTSD and this topic, trauma and racism, I was listening to another podcast, Krista Tippett, it's called On Being.
Yes,
and
she's
her
lovely.
guest, she's amazing. He was talking about PTSD and how a lot of this that we're feeling is in our bodies. And, it took me back to my first encounter with a police officer here in Long Beach and how it got stored in my body. Or the first time that I came to this country and I realized that I was a different color than everyone else. It got stuck in my body and my emotions. I went through a war when I was 10 years old. I mean, all these images of burning bodies, all these things, even though maybe I thought, okay, that didn't really bother me, but my body stored it, right? And I've learned enough about in therapy that I know it's there and you have to kind of, eventually bring it out and go through it. What do you think, going back to the idea of thoughts, right? And if you're ready, free will, but yet our bodies, our reactions stop us from hearing the truth that we need to love, we need to accept others. What do you recommend when it comes to trauma and PTSD? How can people begin to...
I'm not a PTSD
Okay,
expert.
sure.
So just sort of that, let's just put that out. I'm
Sure.
not a PTSD expert. Right. So I'm not the best person to ask that question.
Sure.
But I, work with people with trauma and just really processing their trauma and really just understanding, sort of unearthing those subconscious thoughts, right? Like when we go through something, we have an evaluation of it in our minds.
Yes,
and
right.
That create,
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
But it becomes sort of repressed and pushed down, especially if it's extremely distressing, right? The thoughts about what's happening. If it's very distressing, then our brain is trying to kind of protect us and like not live in this state of like extreme discomfort. So it's like just sort of pushes it down, and then it just sort of comes out in these other ways. It comes out in more subconscious ways. And a lot of the work is about bringing a voice to those experiences and processing those experiences and seeing the thoughts that we've pushed down, right? And that's what experience is. Experience is an interpretation of what's happening.
Right. And that's what kind of triggered me when you said that. You said, it's what we think of that image. And that's why it kind of got me thinking about trauma, right?
Yeah. And that's why, people are actually going to have like my thoughts about what happened to George Floyd and him calling out for his mom, that triggered thoughts in me.
Yes. Maternal instincts of care and love. Yeah. And
so I had a bigger reaction to it because I had thoughts about that. Right.
Yeah, right.
I had very personal thoughts about that. And that triggered a deep emotional reaction in me that I decided to pay attention to and explore and unearth and look at and realize what was going on. So,
I mention it because I'm thinking if for, let's say, my wife is white, and so all her family obviously are also white. And so I often think about when we talk about these things, and there are people of faith, and we all kind of lean a little more left than the traditional Christian person. But I still have to think about, I wonder what, where is this going in their minds? Is there a story? Is there an experience with a Black person in an alley, or someone who stole this, or maybe something they did? Or maybe it was, I don't know, they voted for a certain person and that person didn't win. I often think about trauma as far as experiences and how do we How do we help people through those experiences that were negative? Maybe not even PTSD, maybe not quite that extreme, but just day-to-day experiences that people have where they're like, I want to help, I want to care, but I can't forget what happened to me 10 years ago.
Yeah, and
What can
processing
people
through
do?
that.
Yeah, exactly. What can people do to process some of those memories?
But that's also racism as well, right?
Okay.
To say, like, if I had a negative experience with a Black person or a person of color,
Yeah,
then that means that all people are like that, right?
correct.
That's our racist bias.
Yeah. Starts with even how you frame it, right? Or maybe your mom said,
Totally.
"Oh,
And
see?"
it's your thoughts,
Yeah.
right? It's thoughts like, oh, I had a fearful experience with a person of color. Now that's all people of color, right?
Yeah.
I deal with this a lot, just even, on a different level with women in the dating, right? And it's right, like they'll have a really painful experience with someone that they're dating,
Oh, sure.
and they'll say, like, men aren't trustworthy.
Right.
I'm
All
just
men are
not
pigs, right?
right. All men are pigs. I can't trust them. I'm just not going to be in a relationship, right? And so we have to do a lot of this unpacking of those stories, right? Unpacking of this experience. Even if you've been betrayed several times by a man, is that true that now all of a sudden all men are, liars and cheaters? And I can understand how our brain is trying to protect us all the time. Like our brain's job, like on sort of this, like, survival level, on this instinctual level, it's to keep us alive and reproduce, right? To keep the human race going, we need to stay alive and reproduce. And so those are a lot of our instincts.
Our monkey brain, our reptilian brain.
Yeah, like that primitive brain back in there. And so just sort of understanding that our brain is trying to make sense of things. And so it's our job as our conscious self to kind of look at that and say, oh, my brain is saying, I had this negative experience with this person that looks like this, so therefore stay away from people that look like that to keep me safe, right? It's just your brain trying to keep you safe. Right? It's just about, like, if you eat if you eat red berries, you're going to die. So don't eat any red berries. Right? And so it's just self that steps in and says, okay, but are all red berries poisonous? Right? Is that true? Right? Same thing. And pardon if this is an ignorant example. I'm still learning, so I'm going to make mistakes, and I probably accidentally offend people, and I'm sorry, and I'm open to feedback for sure. But just really, like, saying, like, my brain is just trying to kind of like categorize things for my safety.
Yeah.
And part of that is also going to be my socialization as well. Right? Like if you are socialized, I'm learning about microaggressions and micro racism, right? Just little subtle remarks, little jokes, right? Jokes are sort of this, like, passive aggressive, it's a passive aggressive, permissive revelation of a cultural attitude. And so when people make jokes that alienate or oppress any kind of person, it creates these sort of there's these microaggressions that create beliefs in our brain that form our thoughts and our perspectives.
Yeah.
So we learn to pay attention.
Pay attention.
And just that's where our conscious brain comes in and says, okay, wait a second, right? Even if this has been my socialization, even if this is my primitive brain, it's sort of survival instinct to try and organize things in a certain way. It's not an excuse, that's an understanding. And now that I know better, I can do better. I can think better. I can perceive better. I can act better, right? Just that unearthing that, looking at it. Yeah.
What do you think of the role of spirit? I don't mean church or religion, but just of inner work, of the inward journey, as we spiritual people call it. What do you think is the role of self-examination in learning to love? I don't know if that question makes sense. I just mean, like, is there beyond knowledge? Is there something that we can do that is spiritual, that is like prayer, meditation, to kind of calm our hearts?
I think that openness, right?
Mm.
Quiet and meditation and prayer comes receiving,
Yes.
right? I think often we think of prayer as speaking.
Mm.
And I think often, we know that prayer is communication.
Yeah.
So a big part of that is listening. And I think a lot of us have that knowing, that we are designed for love and connection and
Yeah.
relationship and fairness and justice and peace, right? We're designed for belonging. We are hardwired for that belonging.
Mm.
And so I think creating the quiet and connecting with that, we know.
Yeah.
If we listen. And I think it's hard to listen because there's so much noise. Modern life, it's always been like this, right? There's always been distractions and noise and things and happening. And I think this movement has come at a perfect time because people have less distraction.
Yes.
Right? I think it's been this perfect mix, time and place in history for this to come up.
No doubt.
Right?
Wow.
Because there's few people have to.
Yeah.
It's in your face and there are less distractions, so you can't look away.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. Right? We grow, and when we stretch, and stretching can be uncomfortable, but there's really no other option right now. Right? You can put your fingers in your ears and close your eyes. La, 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 la. Obviously, pretend nothing is happening and everything is fine. And you can do that,
it's impossible, right? Almost. Yeah, it's nearly impossible to close your eyes to this. I mean, when Rodney King happened, it was one man with a camera, and the news picked it up 3 weeks later. 3 weeks later. Now, that video was shot live, and in seconds, the whole world saw it. Yeah. And the space and time of this pandemic has caused us all to consider our part.
We have to look. We have to see it for the first time for a lot of us. It's always been there, but we have been distracted and ignorant because we had to take the time to look, and now we have the time, so we can't not look. And I don't think it's a bad thing.
So maybe 2020 is the best year ever after all. I don't think so.
About
We're
that.
not quite there yet, but maybe, huh?
Well, I saw a post about that
really?
Coronavirus has forced us to slow down and look inward, right? The death of George Floyd has forced us in our time of slowing down and looking to look at this problem. Because we don't really have a lot else to look at right now. Pretty sure even, Netflix is going to dry up soon. I'm like,
right.
Who's making new shows?
No one, right?
No one again. But at some point, the supply of food might know, but the supply of,
entertainment,
sitcom.
Well, that's why your YouTube channel's there, so we can all be
Come
watching.
On over to YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Learn and grow. Be a little bit entertained by my lack of coolness in the process.
I love your videos. We have a few more comments here on YouTube. Let's see. It says here, Toos now, hi. And then the comment was very true. So yes, thank you for your comment, Toos now. They're on YouTube. Wow.
But I also want to say too, David, don't listen to me. Like for people, if some of this is connecting with you, go on social media, start listening.
Yes.
To Black people right now. This isn't the time for white people to have the spotlight. I'm not here for the spotlight. I'm here to amplify those voices and to call people to listen to the people who are talking, the people who are being impacted. Right? I'm not being impacted by this. This hasn't been my story. This hasn't been my life. This isn't my platform. This is my call to action. This is my call to listen. That's it. That's all I'm here for, is just calling people to listen to the people who are speaking, the people who have been suffering. It hasn't been me.
Yeah. Well, you're doing your part. by speaking and also by pointing people in the right direction, which is a wonderful, what a
I'm a
good
director.
guide does. Yeah.
I'm here to direct. I'm not here to lead.
Crossroad
right.
person there.
Right. Yeah. I'm here to
Yeah.
direct you toward the leaders. Like,
Yeah.
follow them. That's my job.
You know, I think one thing that I do think is important about, let's say, a white person, again, my wife being also a woman that is committed to anthropology, and she's a principal at an inner city school. I think the reason why it's important to hear, quote, white voices is because I think that the conversation has to, I don't know if it start there or end there or include, but it must include white people around a table talking about these things and saying, hey, you know, how are you processing this? Because
totally.
In some ways, as a non-white person, I sometimes think, does my wife and her family feel attacked by all this? You know, maybe the empath in me, I'm not unilateral, like, okay, this is all against one race, because I know the issues that I have experienced among my own people based on color. I am a part of the problem as well. And so I think when white people, let's say 4 or 5 women, moms, get together to talk about this with someone like you, let's say, guiding them, right? I think that can be very powerful.
And I think that's true. Having these conversations with each other, talking about it with each other, opening it up.
Right.
Right. Opening this up. And I've been talking, that's all I've been talking about. I mean, not with my clients, part of our session, because I have clients mostly in Canada. Yeah, pretty much mostly in the Canada and the US, but some in Europe as well. And this is impacting all of us. This is, you know, it's the experience of all of us. And and so we've been talking about it. We talk about other things as well, but we've been starting off every session with checking in. How are you doing? What are your thoughts? What's going on? Right. And I'm hearing a lot of that from my white clients saying, I want to do something.
Right.
Like, I just feel this like stirring in my spirit and I want to do something. And so, yeah, I've been talking about that. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's going to take, let's just say, in terms of color, a white person that's enlightened like you, that's pointing the way.
I'm not enlightened, David. Okay. I'm just learning.
A learning person. Like, you're not woke.
I'm not fully lit. I'm just sort of this dim little thing. This dim light.
Okay, fair. So a dim lit light. Just a dim wit. A dim wit. This dim. I've been called that too.
Which is not totally inaccurate. I have some wit, and it's a little bit dim. I'm a dimwit.
I didn't say dimwit.
But you can. It's not true.
Dimwit. Well, but what I was thinking, it'd be fun to have someone like you, and then let's say a Latina woman or man, of course, and then an African American woman. I think that's when I look at Martin Luther King Jr. tapes and even Malcolm X tapes, and I say even only because people seem to feel like he was more violent than MLK. But when you begin to hear these voices that are lit, that are woke, that were definitely woke, or, you know, Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela, you hear these individuals. Now bring it down to the common man. When you have common people, but that are listening, that have taken their free will in the right direction, and they come together, I think it can impact the whole world. So I think your platform, that's why I was so excited to have you. It's so powerful. Your words are so powerful because you're not saying, hey, I got it all together, but you're saying, hey, come follow me. I'm learning some things. And people can discern and be like, I think I'm going to follow her. And then I think if you then get together with a black woman that's doing the same thing, Latina woman, an Asian woman, an Indian woman, then I think there can be power, because then all of us can relate to someone on that panel or in that conversation. So your role is so powerful and so significant.
Well, thank you. I want my power to be right now about empowering.
Yeah.
Empowering others, right? And just, yeah.
Well, is there anything else, Julia, that you'd like to say? I think it's been amazing. Is there anything else? I mean, we'll talk about your links and how to get a hold of you, but anything else you wanted to say before we say
just
goodbye?
Really, if you feel the stirring in your spirit, go learn, go listen, and then amplify those voices. And if you're scared of being criticized, just acknowledging that that's ego, right? That's okay. Criticism isn't going to kill you,
Yeah.
right? People disagreeing with you is going to slay you. It might be uncomfortable, but, and this is not self-promotion, but if you want to learn how to unpack those feelings and deal with that stuff, then that's what we do in my Shift Society. And I do have a ton of free videos about that as well on my YouTube channel, just about really getting more aware of our thoughts and our feelings and how to process them. But that's the deep work that we're doing. That's what we're looking at in there. And like, how do I not let my fear, my ego fear, stop me?
Can't wait for that video. Ego fear versus, what is it you
Ego
called
fear.
it?
Ego fear versus just actual fear.
Just actual,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right, like actual threat, like real threat fear.
And that's coming
right?
up next
threat
week.
to my ego is different threat to my life. And so really just, and be okay, just actually I do have a free about criticism, how to deal with criticism, and just really understanding criticism is never about you. It's about someone's thoughts. And we can decide whether or not we want to reflect on it or return it, right?
Yeah.
You can return that criticism and say, you know what, I stand by what I said and did, and I believe that it was right, and I understand if you didn't, and I'm going to leave that with you. Or we can, look at it and say, you know what, I hear what you're saying and I see that, and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to, wrestle with it. And right. But it's not personal, right? We don't take it personally and make it mean I'm a terrible person. Yeah. So
yes. So
if it's important to you, if you've got the stirring in your belly, say something, or even, you don't have to stand up and speak up with a loudspeaker. Have the conversations with your kids, have the conversations with your parents, have the conversations with your friends, talk about it. Stop. And this is what I've been hearing from the Black people as well is, say something when the racist jokes happen.
Yeah.
Right. Say something when the passive aggressive comments that have to do with race, say something, right? That's the work. That's the bravery. That's oftentimes what we fear so much, right? It's like someone, thinking I'm being too uptight or too, can't take a joke. And like, right. It's like, okay, I know it's not funny.
Right.
And I am uptight about this. Yes. Because it's a problem and it's a serious problem. And I am uptight about it. Absolutely. Stop it. Don't do it. It's not okay.
We got a comment here from Twitch. I want to just acknowledge sometimes okay, I don't want to read all that, but the comment says criticism is only ever hurtful if it is true. Should it be false, why would we bother? Be it true and we know it, it stings. Yeah, criticism stings. Yeah. Right.
And then just look at it, right? If it stings and it hurts, then be willing to unpack it instead of defending it, right? The ego defends it and it's like, oh, I didn't do that, right? We get defended instead of just being like, okay, let's look at this.
Yeah.
Is if there's some truth to it, then let's look at it. It's not a threat. It's just an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, there's so much to this. It's so amazing. That's why, I was so excited to speak to a therapist, because you have the understanding of the ego and the mind and kind of our past to understand this. But you don't have to be a psychologist, right, Julia, to grow. You don't have to be so smart as you. We can, all the rest of us can do it.
Right, I've spent a lot of time learning and understanding because I'm passionate, right? Because I'm passionate about it, and you just have to just start listening, right? Like, and that's the same thing too. If you want to like be doing these internal shifts inside, just start listening. Start learning. Just start listening and learning. You don't have to figure it out on your own. You don't have to know what to do. Just listen and learn. And there's people that are here to help you guide you on that journey. It doesn't have to be hard.
There's a comment here again on Twitch. It says, I would be interested if there is a difference between an insult to one's character and one's ego. Character versus ego. What do you think of that?
I want an example of that.
Okay.
I'd love to hear an example of that. If someone's like, yeah, I'm really curious about that. What they mean by character. I don't want to infer.
Right.
But our ego is our sense of self. So yes, our character is really tied into our ego.
What is character? What is character?
Yeah, I'm really curious about what they mean by that.
When I think
right?
character, I think of values. Like, am I an honest person?
Yeah. And then it's a disagreement, right? If someone's
Right.
like, you don't
You're
have
not
the same,
honest. Right.
right? You don't have the same values as me,
Mm.
right? And if, yeah, if someone's like calling you out for not being honest,
Mm.
um, then that's a, I guess
Growth.
it gets so complicated though too, right? Like that's an action. Not being honest is an action,
Okay.
right? Lying is an action.
Mm.
And so is someone disagreeing with my action?
Okay.
And what are my thoughts on that?
I study the Enneagram, and the 3 is, they call them, their virtue is achievement, and their deadly sin, or their, what do they call it? Their something is lying
Okay.
and deceit.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's a whole other can of worms.
That's,
Maybe we should
that
wrap
just came
this
to my
up
mind.
here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of
We'll
worms.
do another whole thing next month, perhaps. Well,
Thank
everybody,
you
I want to
so
thank you, Julia, for your amazing time here. And I want to, again, tell all of our audience to check out the links at the bottom of this video for Julia's YouTube videos, as well as you have a mastermind. Is that what you have, Julia, that you
It's
offer?
a membership community.
Membership
It's
community,
a membership
excuse me.
community.
Okay,
Yeah, it's called
great.
the Shift Society, where we're
Shift
doing
Society.
just diving deeper into our thoughts and our emotions and our biases and our beliefs and our experiences as human beings, and just really how to create the results that we want in our lives by getting aware of our thoughts and emotions that are driving our behaviors. Now, that was kind of a little bit of a psychological mouthful, but really teaching you how to feel better and have the life that you want.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Julia. With that said, I want to thank you once again for your amazing conversation with you and with our audience. Thank you so much for being here. And where do you mostly hang out? Where can people find you?
Lately, a bit more on Instagram.
Okay, Instagram.
Like I'm connecting with people a little bit more personally on Instagram as far as social media goes. And then, I'm in the Facebook community for my membership group. I'm in there having like more personal, deeper conversations with people. But just as far as like, I just feel a little bit more like connected to Instagram right now. And then I post my YouTube videos, but those aren't very personal because it's like a pre-recorded video. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Julia, for your time. I appreciate that. And to all of my audience, thank you guys for being here. Make sure that you check out the links at the bottom of this video. Thank you again. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much, Julia. Talk to you later.